Welcome to The Explainer, where today we're going to break down the absolutely massive, multi-billion-pound puzzle facing the UK Chancellor in the next autumn budget. You know, it's that classic problem, not enough money and way too many things to spend it on.
All right, let's just dive right in. And to do that, I'm putting you in the hot seat. Just for a minute, imagine you are the Chancellor of the Exchequer. You've got the famous red briefcase, you've got the keys to number 11, and you have got a monster of a financial headache. Because this number is staring back at you from every spreadsheet, 22 billion pounds. That's the hole you need to plug just to get the country's finances back on steady ground. That's according to the Institute for Fiscal Studies, by the way. So, where do you even begin with a number that big? Okay, first things first. Where in the world does a figure that enormous, that almost unimaginable, actually come from? And, why is it suddenly so urgent that we deal with it right now?
Well, it all boils down to the government's own rules. As Chancellor, you've got this rule that says your day-to-day spending has to be covered by what you bring in by the end of Parliament. And right now, you're on track to miss it. Big time. You need £12 billion just to hit that target. But wait, there's more. You also need another $10 million on top of that to create what's called headroom. Think of it as a safety buffer, something to tell the financial markets, hey, we've got this under control, we're not going to get knocked off course by a little turbulence.
So, what's really fascinating is how this black hole just sort of appeared. It wasn't one single thing, it was more like a perfect storm of economic problems all hitting at once. And at the very heart of the problem is this one simple but incredibly powerful word: productivity. It is the engine of the entire economy, right? And right now, that engine is seriously sputtering.
So you've got the official watchdog, the Office for Budget Responsibility, the OBR, and for a while now, they've been, shall we say, a little too optimistic about productivity. Now it looks like they're about to cut their forecast for how much the economy can actually grow. A lower speed limit for the economy means, well, it means lower growth. And for you, the Chancellor, it means a lot less tax money coming through the door.
And look, it's not just productivity. You're also paying way more in interest on the national debt. That's more than doubled since 2019. You've had to backpedal on some welfare cuts that were supposed to save cash. And on top of all that, you're already borrowing money just to fund about 10% of everything the government spends. And people just aren't spending enough to really get the economy going. It's a squeeze coming from literally every direction.
So what's the results of all of this? Well, the UK's total government debt is now sitting at around 95% of the entire country's annual economic output. To put that into perspective for you, we haven't seen debt levels this high since the early 1960s, when the country was still paying off the bills from World War II.
All right, so let's get to your choices. How do you tackle this $22 billion problem? Well, you've got options, sure, but none of them are easy. And frankly, all of them are politically explosive. Broadly speaking, you've got two main levers you can pull. You can either increase taxes, take more money from people and from companies, or you can cut spending on things like public services and welfare. Both of these paths come with huge political risks and, real-world consequences for millions of people. So, let's talk about the tax side of things. You'd think you could just raise the big ones, right? Income tax, VAT? Nope. Wrong. Your hands are completely tied. During the election campaign, your party made some very, very specific promises. No increases to national insurance, no increases to the main rates of income tax, and no increase in VAT. Those are the biggest moneymakers, and they are completely off the table. So that forces you, as Chancellor, to get creative. If you can't touch the big, obvious taxes, you've got to start looking for money in other, less direct ways. And one of your main options is something people call a stealth tax. Instead of actually raising the rates of tax, you just freeze the income levels where people start paying it or where they start paying higher rates. Then as wages go up with inflation, more and more of people's income gets taxed and more people find themselves dragged into higher tax brackets without you ever announcing a tax rise. And the impact of this is absolutely massive. If you decide to extend the current freeze, this number, 5.1 million, that's how many extra people will be pulled into paying income tax. It's a huge tax rise, all done without ever having to call it one. Okay, so what about that other lever, cutting spending? Well, the problem here is all about credibility. Sure, you could just promise to make some really deep cuts, but in the future, maybe after the next election. The thing is, the financial markets, the very people you need to borrow money from, they might not believe you.
Promising some vague cuts down the line can look a lot like just kicking the can down the road, and that makes investors really, really nervous.
And of course, as chancellor, you can't make these decisions in a bubble. You absolutely have to consider what the public thinks. What are voters actually willing to put up with?
Well, have a look at this. According to YouGov, the public is almost perfectly split on whether the country's money problems can be fixed just by taxing the rich. 41% say yes, 43% say no. As chancellor, there is no clear public demand for you to follow here at all.
Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. This is that classic clash between principle and practicality. Even if you could prove that taxing the super rich would actually lose the government money, say by causing them to move abroad, a plurality of Brits, 44%, would still support it. This really suggests that for a lot of voters, this is just as much about fairness as it is about raising money.
So the takeaway for you as chancellor is this. When people see public services struggling, their first thought isn't, oh, they just need more funding. Nope. A majority actually blames poor management or bad government policy. And that makes it incredibly difficult for you to turn around and make the case for raising taxes on ordinary people to fix those services.
And all of this leads to your final and maybe your toughest dilemma. How on earth do you balance solving this immediate crisis with your long-term vision for the country's economy?
See, on the one hand, your government has this really bold 10-year plan called the Modern Industrial Strategy. It's all about boosting growth, backing key industries like clean energy and advanced manufacturing, and it promises to cut business costs, pump money into R&D, and create over 1 million new jobs. It's all about building for the future.
But here is the tough question you have to answer. With an immediate £22 billion black hole in your finances, is a grand plan for tomorrow an affordable luxury for today? Or is the crisis of the present going to force you to make choices that actually undermine the growth you so desperately need for the future? Ultimately, that is the $22 billion dilemma.